Welcome to Seatton Education. I'm your host, Victoria. Every week, we talk to expert guests from around the world to show that home education really can be an achievable alternative to conventional schooling. Joining me today is Jan Smith from Louisiana in the United States. She home educated her 4 children from the very start and feels that learning together at home was key to the strong relationships the family still experience as adults today. Jan, thanks so much for joining me.
Really my pleasure.
Can you start at the beginning for us? When you began homeschooling, it was 1989, rural Louisiana. I don't imagine this was something that many people were doing or talking about. What
Not
drew
at
you to
all.
it?
We were first, there's two parts to this question. One, right out of university, I was a teacher in the public system for 12 and 13-year-old students, and every day would send them home to empty houses with both parents working. And I said, it's not better teachers, it's better mothers that we need. And I committed at that time that I was not going to build my career at the expense of my children. And I didn't have children yet, but I knew that one day we planned to have a family. And my second thing is that we actually met a homeschool family. I'd never ever met anybody that educated their children themselves at home. And so these children were amazing. And, really the proof is what sold the process. And so the product that we saw, these kids were free, they were open hearted, they were confident, they loved each other, and they were just interested in life. And I thought, wow, I think we need to learn more about that. And so we did get to know another family during residency. That was during our medical training years. Roger was in medical school. And then during his residency, we met another family. And we said several families actually, and said, this is what we want to do. So
Mm.
that's
And
where
did
we
it
started.
work? Did it work? Can you describe that impact that homeschooling had on your family relationships?
Uh, you know, At that time, it was such an unknown. It was basically the great experiment, this whole
Mm.
idea of educating your children at home. But now I can say with confidence, not only did it work for our family, but it's worked for thousands of families that at that same time got exposed to the concept of educating your own children. And it produced such wonderful impact for our family. Our children are close friends and they love one another. They love us. Miracle of miracles. None of them live close to us, but
Mm.
we all are committed to traveling to be together and spend holidays together.
And that's such an important point to make, that those family relationships can just take on a whole new level in a homeschooling scenario. That's something that's really inspired us. And I think people sometimes are drawn to homeschooling because either their children have had a bad experience at school,
Right.
or because they have an academic reason to want to pursue it. But I think what's lovely, having met you and spoken to you and Roger, is that focus on just this kind of transformation it can have on your family life is so evident in your experience. And I was going to say, what advice can you give to younger mums who might be starting off on that journey, on sort of practical tips on how to build a strong family culture when particularly when homeschooling?
Well, I think having the time together is just so key because you have time to have fun together, not just wake them up and get them to school and put them to bed and do homework. I think that that's something to really take advantage of, is to do things that you find fun. For our family, we enjoyed being in the water and on the water. So in Louisiana, we have a lot of lakes and we took advantage of that. Um, and we had horses as they got older. When they were young, we rode bikes, and when they were older, we rode horses. And we did a lot of read alouds and family projects. Teaching them to work was an important thing that we did, is that we worked together and played together. And, it really produced some quality relationships.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's not just school. It's not just, okay, we sit down and learn science and maths together. It's that you're having all that time with your children. So it's just structuring your life differently, I think. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. We
Mm.
just we prioritized family. And when your kids are in a public setting and they're away from you during school, there's almost no time together, especially if they have after school activities, which in today's society, they do. They have things that they're involved in, and it leaves no time for the family to really enjoy being together.
Mm. There's a crisis that I was recently reading an article about in the UK. I can't remember the name of it, but it's been diagnosed as a syndrome, which is something like end of school pickup syndrome. And it's basically that these parents are picking up their children from school and getting these overtired, ratty children who then they're really struggling to connect with. And it really um, my husband jokes that I'm far too emotional when I read some of these articles, but these things really upset me because it's not meant to be like that. It makes me so sad that that is some people's parenting experience, that they're just dealing with the time poor dregs of the day, I suppose, and children who are burnt out from being in a really busy system. And um or as you said at the beginning, when you were a teacher, that experience, maybe their parents aren't even getting that. Maybe their parents aren't even at home. And it just makes me so sad that that is how some people experience, their children's childhood. Um, and it makes me, yeah, it makes me so driven to try and say, look, there is actually another way of doing this. Here are some pioneer families like you. When you did it, not very many people were doing this, but you made it work.
Children have almost a low grade of trauma going on
Mm,
because they have anxiety throughout the day of getting it right, of performing to a level where everybody's going to either leave them alone or like them. And then
mm,
after school, everything is adult driven. There's no space for them to detox and unwind or think about their day. And
mm,
so it leaves really almost trauma like symptoms in their life. Who's going to pick me up? What activity do we have? And just time to lay in the grass and look at the clouds. That's non-existent. To sit on the swing and drag your toe through the dirt. That's not happening for children. And we have, as home educators, we have the opportunity to give childhood back to our family and to reclaim time, the sweetest time in the mornings of waking them up and enjoying them. And instead of saying, get up, let's get your lunch, we got to go, we're going to be late, a rush, 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 that we have time to experience quality moments with our children. Now, it's not all sweet and glorious and having them snuggled up on the couch reading a book with you. There are those moments, but there's also conflict times, but we have the time through the day to claim the sweet time and not
mm.
just the difficult ones.
Can you just introduce us a bit to your family dynamic?
Yes, yes. Our oldest son is Caleb, and he is, they all four went to university, but he was born first, and there is a 7 year gap. So there's Caleb, and then 18 months later, we had a daughter named Emily. And then our third child, it was a boy, Rodney. And then the fourth one was also a boy, Hudson. And so there's a 7 year gap. And if they had not been schooled at home, that oldest child would not really know the youngest one very
Mm,
much because they're up and gone and everything is so age segregated with schools
mm,
that the children, they're so different in what they're doing. But if they're at home, then we often learn together. We did a lot of um, where everybody was learning the same thing and every child was able to kind of learn at their level. But if we hadn't been homeschooling, the kids really would not have at all known each other in the way that they were able to because of homeschooling.
mm. And you mentioned reading aloud and also that idea of learning as a family on topics where you could. Can you give some advice as to how mothers can help shape those sibling relationships? That is something that, for me, as a young mother, is so so precious to be able to try and shape positive sibling relationships. How would you go about doing that? How did you go about doing that?
I guess what I would say is that I would create or seeking to create a culture of honor where you honor each other and your spouse, and that the children that like, how do we get along here? Because when they were little, I felt like all I did was conflict resolution. That there was always yang yang. When they were really small, like 7 and under, that I felt like that was a very big part of my day of really a kind of a zero tolerance of the hitting and slapping and biting and kicking and all of that when things did not go your way. And so we did a lot of focusing on um, how did you feel when your sister said that? Especially the oldest two is where it was most vivid in my memory. That, and she was feisty. She's high strung, and I love her to death now. But boy, she was something. And so we would say, so when your sister said that, how did you feel? How could you have dealt with that without kicking or hitting? What would have been a better way to say that?
Mm,
And so we just kind of went back and forth between the two that were having conflict and helping them to understand what would be a better way of honoring them, because lifelong friendships are so important. There are 4 girls in my family, my personal family, and we all live in the same area now, but both of our parents died young, and
mm,
so we only had one another. And I wish that we had been closer when we were little to
mm,
have that. So we've had to work really hard at those relationships. And I think it's important. So as they got older, we just continued to help shape and say, we want to catch them doing something right. So I tried to say, wow, I loved how that was so kind to your brother,
mm.
or not tattletelling on one another, but the oldest one would say something like, Mom, Rodney has something he needs to tell you, and they would know that they had to tell me the truth, or then the other child had the right to say what really happened.
Mm,
So we tried to get them to confess their own wrongdoing, but we tried to catch them doing things right and to give them a lot of positive affirmation. But one thing we did, like a birthday blessing, we still do it. We still do it. That when we started when they were very young, and everybody said something positive about that person, that was their birthday, and we called it a birthday blessing, and just focusing on that child's positive qualities and
mm,
teaching them to accept each other, because love covers a multitude of sins, and kids, they're going to mess up time after time, but teaching them that we're going to honor one another, have a friendship that can last a lifetime. We're going to build the foundation now. We're going to keep teaching and training all through those years, so that by the time they're in high school, they have those solid friendships that will last into adulthood.
mm. Building friendships that last a lifetime is a huge benefit in a society where we see a lot of people um, where relationships are sadly really temporary, and relationships don't seem to be almost valued, or certainly people don't feel they're succeeding at them. So actually, even just teaching the skill of how to get along with other people, and these people aren't going away. You can't just leave the house because your brother's annoying you. You've got to get a way to move past that, and I think that's such a valuable life lesson.
When you're sending them off in the morning, they may have an attitude that you need to stop and deal with, but you don't have time. You're going to drop them off and be done. Whereas if they're going to be there sitting at the table with you that morning, you got to stop and deal with the attitudes
Mm,
and not just the actions, but to really focus on how can we be pleasant toward one another,
mhm,
and not just get work done and not just accomplish the reading lesson or the math lesson, but how do we do this in such a way that is honoring toward each other, that we really want to be together?
mm.
And it's possible. It is possible. I know used to at the end of summer when I would hear moms say, I can't wait to put the kids back in
Yeah.
school, I would be thinking, I can't wait for summer, all the activities of summer to slow down, that they all come back in and we would pull together and be a family again without all the distractions of the summer activities. So it's a different spirit. It's a different type of connection that you can have as a family. And it's not just pie in the sky. It really can happen. Now, there's lots of conflict resolution that occurs because there, anytime you've got two people, they're going to be conflict.
Mm.
But learning to, in a positive way, work through that, to recognize it and say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That was really rude. You know, and by the time they were in high school, they could do that. And when they got to
Mm.
college, it was really frustrating for them how they would have friends that would say something and they could see how they kind of got off track in university, and they'd want to say, wait a minute, you know, and they would want to do basically what we used to call family court. How could you have said that differently? And how did you feel when he said that? And
Yeah.
and to realize that if they just worked it out and forgave each other, then they could go on. And sometimes kids would not speak to each other for several days
Mm.
over something that was really a very simple misunderstanding. That
Mm.
if they had apologized and gone on, it's just
Mm.
life skills. That's one of the most important things that we can teach them, how to resolve conflict
Mm.
in a
It
healthy
is.
way.
And it's something that we don't really cover that much in general society. I always joke because people always say, I think they always say to mothers who, particularly mothers who choose to homeschool, oh, you've given up your career, you've given up your job, you've given up your education. My master's is in conflict resolution. And I
Oh,
say, oh
how
no,
interesting.
I I haven't given it up at all.
Oh
uh,
my. And yet, that's one of children's number one fears is they won't have a lifelong love relationship with someone.
mm,
But if we can, one, pattern that for them with our husbands,
mm,
and then to help them learn the tools of being able to effectively resolve conflict, to recognize it, to
yeah.
understand the root of it, and then to be able to work all the way through to the end of it, and then go play and have fun together, and really let go of it and move on, being fully accepted. I'm sorry, you're on one of my soapbox here. We do a whole session on conflict resolution because I do feel like it's foundational.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's awesome. I've never heard anyone that has a degree in that. That's amazing, Victoria.
I think people can overlook life skills because I think it isn't a subject on a curriculum in schools. So when people start homeschooling, we all know this, they tend to start just replicating school at home. And, you might have maths and English and science and history, but you probably don't have life lessons. Um, and as you noticed through being a teacher, parents often aren't doing that. So it's not on the school curriculum and it isn't happening at home. So actually what you're saying I think is relevant. Even, we'll have people listening to this who decide at the end homeschooling isn't for them. There's still so much of the homeschooling mentality that I think you can take away because I would just advocate for parents to be that much more involved in bringing up their children and in that sense educating their children because these are absolutely, we all say we want children to be happy. We want them to grow up to be happy, independent, strong, carefree adults. And if we're not giving them the tools to do that, then what chance do they have to become happy and successful?
It's almost like we've abdicated any role as a
Mm,
teacher that we have and as a parent. And we've got to train them, whether they're home educating or not, the basic skills that they're going to need for success in life. And
mm,
I feel like that all of life is learning,
mm,
and helping. The more involved a parent is, regardless of the educational stance, that the way of teaching that is being used by that parent, public, private, any situation, the more involved that parent is, the better that child has a chance for success.
mm,
And so I think it's really important in those life skills of cooking and cleaning and understanding organizational skills and knowing themselves. And, one of the things that we did that we felt helped our children get along better, especially in those high school years, was helping them understand basic personalities. And there's
mm,
so many things from Personality Plus by Florence Littauer to the Enneagrams and, all kinds of things. The more they understood the way they were made, and the way their siblings, that they were all created as different individuals, and that was basically going to be the same the rest of their lives, their strengths, their weaknesses,
mm.
their capacity. And I feel like accepting those things about one another made it easier for there to be less competition, less jealousy. And I think that's an important skill for life of
Mm,
accepting people as they are. That
mm.
reduces conflict. It's easier to give a lot of grace if you know that person is,
Yes.
like I have a sister that she's phlegmatic and she's just going to be easygoing. People are going to love her. There are four girls in my family, and we are the four basic personality
Oh,
types.
wow.
And once I understood that, it was so freeing. I thought, wow, I wouldn't have said, why can't I be like that sister or this sister
Mm,
in different ways had I understood that I'm okay. I'm different than them, but this is how I'm created to be, to
mm.
accept that and to make it easier to accept my siblings.
I think that's such a great point that you've made because, firstly, I hadn't thought about teaching it in that way to your children. I think that's such a great practical tip. But I also think that you're very intentional. You've been very intentional about it. It doesn't just happen. And I think you've made that point really well that if you want a good outcome, like anything in life, you've got to really think, okay, how can I make this happen?
I think another mistake that we make in society today is that children, they best learn right before they're fully capable of accomplishing something. Like
Mm.
when they're toddlers, they want to help you empty the dishwasher or fold the clothes. A 4-year-old wants to vacuum. A 12-year-old, not interested. But if you teach them and let them do a job before they're fully capable, then by the time they're really able to do it, they're competent.
Mm.
And it's easy to pass that job off. We don't start training kids until to do real life work until they're far too old to really have
Mm.
fun doing it. Like when a student first learns to drive, they want to drive everywhere. Go to the
Yeah.
grocery store, great. I'll be glad to do that.
Yes.
But if you wait until they're 18 and you ask them to go to the grocery store, mom, so that's just the kind of thing that I'm talking about with
Mm.
cooking and cleaning and all of the life skill jobs. If you
Yeah.
do that when they're young, it's fun for them. And then by the time they're old enough to actually do that job, they have a level of competency
Mm.
that then they have no excuse not to do it except for being
Yeah.
unwilling.
We've talked about success in terms of personal success. Academically, all four of your children went to university on scholarships, if I'm right.
They
What's the
did.
secret to the academic success of the Smith family?
One, I think loving learning and being excited as a mom, being excited about learning with them.
Mm.
And that starts when they're young. It's hard to say you should love reading and they never see you crack a book. And yet, if you read aloud to them and they see your emotion and see your response to the story, or they see you reading personally, then they're going to say, that's a high value in our family to be able to read and enjoy
Mm.
quality books. And so, learning along with them and making learning fun, as much hands-on activities as possible. Vary the place you're going to do it and
Mm.
focus on their strengths and not their weaknesses. And sometimes I think we put a lot of too much emphasis on a child's weakness that's probably going to be a weakness for the rest of their life and probably not going to be something that they choose to do professionally if
Mm.
it's a weakness. So helping them understand what their passions are, what lights their fire, what do they get excited about, and going with that, especially in those high school years, is really helping them hone in on what it is that they like and they enjoy. What will they be good at in life? So that when they get to university, if that's a path they choose, and I don't feel like that's the quality of measure in today's society, that not everything today requires a university degree. And although ours did do that route, and I'm thankful that they did, it's not a requirement in life.
Mm.
And there are other options. So I don't want to condemn anybody that chooses a different route than going to university.
Join me for the second part of this conversation in the next episode.